Yeah, no, you sound absolutely perfect. And talking about streams of consciousness, Wes, welcome to Cinema, Life and Everything, where suddenly it all gets weird for a few seconds, where it's like, oh no, we're being recorded now. But you
Yeah.
are an absolute pro of podcasting yourself. How are you today,
Oh,
mate?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. That's the awkward bit because we've already asked each other that, but now we're being
Yeah.
recorded. Wait. So
Oh no.
oh no. Um, but what I would like to say before we get started into it, would you like to tell the listeners and the watchers a little bit about yourself so they can get to know you, and then we'll have a talk about your exceptional film choices.
The one thing I didn't prepare for was to talk about myself. Yeah, so I am a filmmaker.
Yep.
I've worked in film and video for about the last 20 years. I've done everything from corporate um, to feature films, music
Mhm.
videos, things like that. I've done just about every job that you can think of: still photographer, production assistant, director, line producer. You name it, I pretty much have done it. And I've studied film for a long time. And I also do my own film podcast as well.
This is
Am I
awesome.
allowed to say the name of it?
Please do.
Can I
Yeah,
plug it?
I'm gonna plug the hell out of it all the way through this whole mate.
It's called View the Right Thing, and it's sort of like we like to think of it as like a book club for movies. So at the end of every episode, we try to give you the name of the next movie, and then you have a week to watch it, and then
Mm.
come back and listen to just two friends talk about the film. And hopefully I can give some interesting facts or filmmaking tidbits, things like that. And just, yeah, it's just a fun time listening to two people talk about movies, I guess.
I would say one of the biggest takeaways I've had from your podcast, which is something which I really admire about it, not only now with especially like the Into the Spider-Verse episode, the Die Hard episode, where not only is it like you say a fun informal chat, it's tremendously erudite. There's some wonderful facts being imparted, and it really does like Die Hard, especially as soon as I finished listening to the podcast, I went home and watched the film again because you picked up on stuff, and I pretty much watch Die Hard every Christmas, and you picked up on stuff that I had never picked up on before. So it was such an incredible way to see what some people consider to be a low-brow action film dissected, and suddenly I saw so much more hidden meaning and nuance, and so many intelligent choices being made by John McTiernan and the film
Mm.
and and the crew. It was I managed to watch a very well watched film by me with new eyes. So thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, that's really nice of you to say. I really appreciate that. That's the goal is to in theory, people have just watched the movie and then listened to the podcast, but the
Mm,
goal is to make them want to like go back to their TV and watch it again right away. I
you
think we so we
succeeded.
so we have a new episode on Top Gun Maverick that just came out
Oh,
this week. And sorry, I'm dating our this episode. And I'm trying to do more with social media now. So I edited like a little video thing of us talking about one, just a little section of the podcast
sure.
episode. And I like to end those little TikToks and Instagram reels with a bit of the movie, a minute or two of the film. So you hear us talk about stuff, and then you get to watch a little bit of the movie. And the hope is that by the time you finish watching that reel, you go, oh, I gotta watch this again.
Brilliant,
So yeah.
brilliant. Oh, I love that. So, one question before we get into the films, though. Obviously, surrounded yourself by film, a complete cinephile, love every aspect of it. What draws you to film and what keeps you inside it, the creative process?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And that's actually why I like your podcast, is that, there's lots of different film podcasts, and I do one thing where I'm talking a lot about film. And what I like about yours is that it's really personal.
Mm,
And I don't think a lot of people like me, we get so caught up in the film itself, and what that director is trying to say, that we don't really talk much about ourselves. So that's why
mm.
I really appreciate what you're doing. um
Thank you.
uh and now I've kind of sort of why film? Why am I into
Yeah,
it?
what? Yeah, why film? Why has that creative pathway spoke so strongly and resounded so
Yeah,
strongly throughout your life?
that's a good question. I don't totally know the answer.
Good.
I'll do my best to kind of fumble my way to maybe an answer.
Sure.
Uh, so I was exposed to movies at a really young age. I remember watching, HBO as a
Mm,
very small child and just being exposed to all sorts of different things. My parents were really good about making sure we had different viewpoints in our lives, that we didn't prejudge things.
mm,
My parents had us reading at a very early age. So and my father was really into music. He was a percussionist, and and he had this huge, like, eclectic style of music he was into. So it was, Chicago, or the Fifth Dimension, or
mm,
Earth, Wind and Fire, and Isaac Hayes. Maybe that's kind of all in one realm, but he was kind of all over the map. James Taylor, he's a big James Taylor fan,
mm.
and I never really connected with that. But as I was going through his vinyl collection at a very young age, I found records like Henry Mancini's The Pink Panther, John Williams' Superman,
Whoa.
or Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Whoa.
And so those were things that I did know and loved and could connect to. And I think there was something in the movies that helped me connect to my father in some
Yeah.
way. Because he was very logical. Like, he enjoyed reading the manuals to new things. Gets a lawnmower, he wants to read the manual. He reads it front to back, cover to cover, first thing before he touches anything in the box. And that's not me. I'm like, throw the instruction manual to the side and take the thing out, and then unscrew all the bits and take it apart and see how it works. Like, that's more me. I'm definitely, very emotional, and in tune with that. And so having sort of this music thing connected to movies, is a very emotional thing, and
Mm.
I think it was a way that I was able to sort of connect with my dad. um, and I think that kind of began my love of film. And for a long time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. um, at a young age, I dislocated my arm playing. Well, I wasn't playing baseball. I dislocated my arm on a playground, but
Mm.
I it took me out of playing baseball, and so my parents were sort of like, "Hey, you should stay busy. Why don't you?" We just seen a play. We'd gone to go see a play, and I was like super enamored by the actors. They were like, "Why don't you do an acting class?" So we did an acting class, and it was like a lot of
Mm.
improv and stuff. And I sort of fell in love with the idea that the things that I had seen on TV and things I had seen in the theater were now sort of a reality for me. And so that sort of, I think, really ignited things and just kind of
Amazing.
snowballed from there. So probably around the age of like 10, 11, I like really, it really clicked.
That's
I
such
don't
an
know.
ama
I'm sorry I rambled that, but that's
No,
kind of
no.
where it comes from.
I just think that's a really personal and beautiful insight and like very heartfelt. I love that, like a connection to your father. And
Mm.
I also, now in you saying that, and so I caught you off guard with it. I don't think it's any mistake that the three films you've picked today have such strident and like iconic scores to them and such emotional scores. I think that plays back into what you've just said about the music and stuff. So, would you like to announce your three films if that's okay?
Oh, sure, sure. So the three films I picked were Sunrise,
Mm.
which is not exactly a silent film, from 1927,
Yeah.
27, 28. Uh, Jaws, Steven Spielberg blockbuster, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which is my favorite film of all time.
Back to Los Angeles when I saw the amazing T-shirt and I was blown away by it as well. So where do you want to start, Wes? We can pick one and we can just start working our way through.
I don't know. I mean, we can start chronologically if you want,
Just
or
yeah. Should we go? We go with a film that like literally blew me away. I sort of never heard of it. If I'm honest with you, then you said watch this film, and I watched it over the last couple of days ago and was absolutely blown away by it. So summarize if that's okay. A
yeah,
tale of two
absolutely.
lovers, right?
A Song of Two
Song of
Humans.
Two. So I see. Song of Two
You're
Humans.
close. Yeah.
Close enough, but yeah, absolutely gorgeous. So why summarize, man?
Well, it's like a classic story of temptation and sort of re falling in love with, finding yourself and the person you're supposed to be with. It's just like a really beautiful story, and for its era, it's really uniquely told. It's F.W. Murnau, who most people know Nosferatu,
Mm.
um, or maybe Faust, but it's German expressionism. This is like I think this might have been his first American film that he did.
Oh, okay.
And so the German expressionism is all over it, but it's still, you know, um, it's definitely American in its melodrama.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's just a really, I think it's just a really beautiful film. It like tugs at my heartstrings, and um yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of fun to watch. What did you get out of it?
I just thought it was glorious. I mean, it was beautifully shot. There were some shots in there as well, particularly when the lovers are sort of re-wed and they're walking together, and it goes from this crowded street into like a forest and all glowing, and then back to the crowded street and getting beeped. And I'm like, that's a hell of a shot. And you know, it all had to be done practically, walking them towards the screen and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my actual watching it like a film, like the technical bits leapt at me like that's really clever, and the fact it all
Oh
had to
yeah.
be done practically. But then at the same time, just this beautiful tale, simply told, but just like you say, the heightened stakes, and I love the gloriousness of it. So like the temptress woman was all in black, and the way she'd always
Hmm.
be in a state of undress, or when the man of the tale, the husband, was being tempted or like getting angry at the way his face would change, like you say, very much like the other film Nosferatu. These real big, beautiful scapes and cuts, and yeah, I just was just the magnitude of it. I think that's the thing that really upset me. The simplicity, but simplicity doesn't mean easy. Just the beautiful. It was just glorious,
Yeah.
untroubled, untainted cinema.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about like the cinematography, it was definitely revolutionary for what they were doing. They were shooting, double exposure. Some of those things they had to shoot, an actor just all on a black background and know exactly where they needed to be placed
Oof.
I mean, it's a lot of work, especially in that era. This is a movie that the first Academy Awards I think were 1928 or 29. So this won some of the first Academy Awards. So Janet
Wow.
Gaynor won the first Best Actress, and I think the Best Actress that she won is maybe the only version of Best Actress, because it was a compilation of like sort of like a culmination of three works that she had done. This film being the
Oh,
culmination of that. And so she's the only one to have her specific kind of Best Actress. It won Best Picture. It won cinematography, of course. And yeah, it was really neat. I think it's some of the first back projection that
yeah,
was used in a film. So yeah, so a lot of those things that you're talking about, like where the background is changing, or the temptress being, the devil on his shoulder or whatever, it's
yeah. The
really
whistling,
really
the
interesting.
whistling at the door.
Yeah, yeah. And interesting use of sound. This is what do they call it? Oh, I forgot what the so it's not technically a silent film because it has a soundtrack on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and this movie came out like a month or two, maybe even only weeks before The Jazz Singer, which was the first talkie.
yeah,
And so this was sort of maybe, the kind of the end of an era in film, because The Jazz Singer was the beginning of an era.
I know.
Um, you go ahead.
So I was going to say, what keeps you coming back to it? What attracts you so much to this film? Why was this one a standout for you? Obviously, it has its reference point in history, but yeah, what makes you so passionate about it? Why did this one leap out at you?
Great question. I think the performances are really
Yeah,
good. the there's a sequence I really love in the middle of the movie that doesn't really maybe belong, but I love, which is the drunk pig sequence.
Pig, that pig was
Of
drunk for real. I'm sorry. That pig. I was watching that with thinking, his back legs are giving out. I was like, they probably got that pig drunk, didn't they?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just the innovation of it.
Yeah.
I have a really big appreciation for the things that have come before. So, as a filmmaker, we're constantly trying to like find new things or new ways to tell the same story over and over again. And but you still have to sort of you have to have respect for the things that came before.
Yes.
And again, sort of going back to the things that were innovative, the title cards, right? For the
Yeah.
subtitles, there's first of all, there's very few of them in the film. Um, and I'm sorry, I say and a lot, so you're
Don't
gonna love that for your
worry. So
podcast.
do I. I like it.
The the way so when the temptress is posing the idea that he drowns his wife, and the title cards, like the words get drowned, sort of like sink.
Yes.
They bend and they sink, like nobody had seen something like that before. And this beautiful sort of symmetry of the film, not just in the visuals, but how the story was told. When you see that last title card that says the end, it comes up from the bottom as if it's floating back up. So it's sort of this like just like the man has to rekindle or sort of renew his vows to his wife. They
Yeah.
go to that church and they see a couple getting married, and he sort of like in that moment renews his love for his wife. um the the idea of drowning somebody, or their love sinking to the bottom, floats back up to the top, which I think is really kind of a beautiful thing, just in such a simple way, just in title cards. So um
And I
it,
think
it
there was, sorry, go on.
no, I was just gonna say it's easy. I think it's actually a really easy movie to love.
Yeah, and the thing is, even with the subtitles, or the title cards, I actually felt the performances were so strong, particularly even before the Temptress woman is saying, perhaps she could drown. I'm like, oh, she's going to suggest murder, just the way in her body and stuff. And I'm like, what you're saying there, it's so important to know what's come before, because it's if you understand the fundamentals, if you understand the history of any particular art or something you're passionate about, it informs the language, the creative language that you can use going forward. The more reference points you have, the more places you can sort of take from, not steal from,
Mhm.
but take from, and make your work richer and more well-rounded. Because, like I say, you understand where the art form has come from. So it's such an awesome choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this movie, w- almost we almost wouldn't get to see this film because the original negatives were destroyed.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, so there was this warehouse where they Fox kept all of
Oh,
their negatives, and you might have heard it was the Little Ferry fire.
yeah,
It was in Little Ferry, New Jersey. They had this warehouse full of old films. What some people don't know is that old films were filmed on silver nitrate film,
yeah.
which is highly combustible, and over time exude gases, and the gases built up in this warehouse and essentially blew the warehouse up, like caught the warehouse caught
Jesus.
on fire and destroyed all these negatives. And they ended up making a new negative from a print that had survived somewhere else.
Oh,
So we very luckily, and this is one of the first films to be put in the Library of Congress in the United States, where they take, I think they started doing this in like 1989. They take films that have, either a cultural or aesthetic or historical significance, and sort of they digitize them and they put them in the National Library here to preserve for all time. And this is one of the first films that they ever did that with. So we're very lucky to be able to see this movie.
oh, very much so. But what I was going to ask as well is, how do you feel? I mean, obviously, it's going to be something that has been adapted now and used, but streaming, and also, I will say, me trying to find this film to begin with, quite tricky, not streaming anywhere. So there are certain films, I remember
Yeah.
films from the 70s and 80s that I grew up with. And unless you're trying to get some physical media somewhere, which can normally be quite expensive now, some films are really, really hard to find. I mean, where do you stand on, all right, we have this ability now to have a load of content available
Mhm.
to us, content being made all the time, always something new. But do you feel that in somewhat some of like these tent pole reference points are being a loss to time a little bit? And it's a shame because in this rush to make new content, maybe we should be able to go back and look at some of the older stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, my it's a very difficult and nuanced thing,
Yeah,
because we're talking about multiple things, right? We're talking about access,
yeah,
to films, we're talking about what kind of access we have to films. I know some people are, die hard, "I gotta have the physical media," so there's that sort of part of the discussion. Yeah, obviously, it's really important to preserve these things. Criterion, I feel like, is doing a pretty good job. Their
mhm,
streaming service is pretty good. Um, you know, I think if you're just talking about just general access, um, yeah, I don't know much what to say other than, yeah, I think we need to find ways to preserve more of these things and have access to them. Capitalism is going to dictate that
yeah.
that you're going to need 10 streaming services in order to be able to see everything. Fortunately, this movie went into public domain in uh, you know 2023,
Yeah,
so you probably are going to start seeing it eventually. If demand is big enough, you'll probably start seeing it on YouTube and things like that. But um yeah, I mean, we definitely need the access to things. I think there's a question about which versions do we have access to. um
good point.
uh and again, going back to, like, if they only sold it to you, right? It wasn't available on a streaming service or wasn't available for free somewhere, uh, but you had to pay for it. Is that okay? Is that enough? A is physical
Yeah,
alone enough? I personally am trying to reduce my sort of footprint on physical media these days.
sure.
So I have to really want something for me to buy it, and I only buy in like 4K now. Um, unless I see a 3D movie, because I do have a 3D TV and a 3D player. So if I
Nice.
see a 3D movie that comes out that I really want the 3D version, I will buy that at a lower resolution. But generally speaking, I'm only buying 4K, and it has to be, you know, yes, I own ET in 4K. Yes, I own Jaws in 4K.
Fair
Um,
play.
uh, uh, you know, but this movie Sunrise, I own digitally. It just it's easy to do it that way, and uh it saves my shelves a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
from the weight of I have, I don't know, by a lot of people's standards this isn't very many, but I have about almost 1,700 titles,
Wow.
between physical and digital, and if they were all only physical,
Oh,
like,
that's a yeah.
where do you put that,
That's a good
um
point. I
so
just I think you've said it perfectly there in a sense, like as long as we have access to it, as long as there is and I just find it a very interesting time. I was listening to a podcast with Trent Reznor the other day, and he was talking about physical media or like having a luxury version of it, like a vinyl. And I'm wondering, just because everything is on Spotify now or other wonderful musical streaming services, it doesn't mean that CDs have completely ceased to exist or vinyl has as well. It's just
mm,
almost having that way of keeping it like you have. There are certain films, certain classics, certain things that nostalgically you want to hold and own and have that actual feel of it. There are other films that are just for pure amount of physical space you have that are better just to keep online on a streaming service
yeah.
or on a hard drive somewhere.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's larger questions involved in this, like which versions are
Yes.
available, what resolutions and director's cuts, or unedited trilogies of some things we won't name. Um uh
Mm.
I think it's important that people have access to those things. I'm okay with saying, no, this is the definitive version. If the director's like, no, this is the definitive version, the
Mm.
new fancy version that we've added CG effects to, it's their thing. It's their
Yes.
movie. So, that's fine, but we shouldn't lose the history behind those things. So
Perfect answer. Yeah, I completely agree. So, should we, if we're going chronologically, should we hop along
sure,
to Jaws next then?
sure.
Oh, this is wow. I mean, what a film! What a film! This is one that I own physically on 4K as well, and the big special edition with the shark inside it and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's the silliest question in the world to ask, really. But why Jaws, Wes?
Oh boy. Uh, how could you not love a movie that makes people afraid to get in a bathtub? You know, like people are just afraid of any form of water. Uh, I heard about a screening of this. There's a company, I think it was this company. It's called Rolling Roadshow, and
Mm.
they go around the United States and they play movies on big inflatable screens in unique places.
Oh,
And they once did this in the middle of a lake where you were watching Jaws while sitting on an inner tube in the middle of the water. And
oh, that's cool.
I would really love to do that. But yeah, so I mean, how could you not love a movie that just like absolutely terrifies people, you know, at a young age? It's Steven Spielberg, so of course it's innovative in the way it tells its story. It was fraught with problems throughout the entire. It was over budget, over schedule. The machinery didn't work right, but they still made one of the greatest movies. In fact, the first blockbuster. Um, you know, coined the term blockbuster.
Yeah.
How could you not love this movie?
And I just love the fact it's marketed towards children, and you have the 1-2 double of a head coming up towards the screen with its eye hanging out, and the geyser of blood. Not to say like this sort of a. I mean, it is Spielberg. I've always found is so good at weaving horror into his films, and also a
Mhm.
lot of the time doing it in broad daylight. That is so just showing that sometimes the worst things do not happen at night. It's what we actually choose to see. And it's so affecting because you have the normal conceit of like it's going to be the dark thing in the corner, and he'll
Yeah.
just launch it at you right thing in broad daylight. Nowhere safe. No, nothing safe.
Yeah, the nighttime element to it, right, is the thing you don't see. That's the equivalent. It's not really
Yeah.
nighttime, obviously, but yeah, the equivalent to that is the less is more.
Yes.
And that was a byproduct of things not working right, you know, and it was a little bit of luck and a really great editor who, you know, Spielberg was convinced multiple things throughout the shoot. He was convinced every single day that he was going to be fired from this
Mm.
production. They constantly were every day they had a new version of the script. That's usually a really bad sign. And he was convinced that this movie wouldn't make any money and it would be a huge flop. And they gave it to the editor, and the editor's like, "No, there's like something here. You just have to get creative with it." And you know, thank God the shark didn't work when they first got out there.
Good old
So
Bruce.
Bruce, Bruce,
Which
or as he also called it, the Great White Turd.
the great ones. It was
So
drunk like the pig in Sunrise. But wouldn't you say as well, one of the two other big things for me as well, or two of the big things, we've talked quite a bit about soundtracks already, to add
mhm,
suspense and just absolute like when you can't see the shark, that perfect, one of the most perfect soundtracks ever. And
yeah.
what a cast. What like
Well,
everyone deserved an Oscar in that pretty much.
yeah. Well, it's funny because you talk about the soundtrack when John Williams played the score for Spielberg, he laughed at him and was like, "No, seriously, what's the theme?" Uh, but once you put it, you know, to the underwater shots, you know, it's perfect. It's iconic.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. If
Yes.
anybody just goes dun dun dun, dun. I mean, everyone knows exactly what that is. It's such a fantastic score. John Williams is amazing. And yeah, the cast. I mean, uh, Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Scheider, especially. Just what a weird like trio. They're all
Yeah.
so vastly different, and their acting styles are all different, and but they just make it work. And I think Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss like had a big falling out on the set, and
Mhm.
I think Robert Shaw was drunk a lot, and you know that famous Indianapolis
Yeah.
USS Indianapolis monologue. The first night they shot that, he was just like absolutely plastered.
Oh
He kept blowing
wow.
it. Yeah, he blew it, and, he I think he called Spielberg that night and was like, "I'm so sorry. Give me another shot to do it tomorrow. I promise I can do it." And they went in the next day, and he got it in one take. Just
Wow.
absolutely nailed it. So, um, yeah, what a cast. What a cast.
What and I just think I think the editing as well. You said it's when you're talking about a true masterpiece, and there are no holes in it anyway. From the acting to the perfect
Mm.
runtime to the use of horror and sound design, and just like I say, it's a surprise to the audience and amazing stakes. It's just every character feels well rounded, every relationship feels true, and the way it was adapted from the book and how those little changes in it to remove some of the extra elements of the affair that happens from the book to the film, just everything's so perfectly judged.
Well, they had to, ban Peter Benchley from the set.
Really, because he was like, I'm not
He
gonna.
would he yeah, there was a romance subplot
Yeah.
and like, a mafia subplot involved in it, and they were just like, "You gotta get this stuff out of here, man, like, this is too much." So, yeah, so they banned P Benchley from the set. Yeah, and Spielberg, I think too, you know, he already immediately from a young age was really, really talented, and he understood how to frame single shots.
Mm,
Um, so like, you know, from from Duel, um, onward, I think maybe the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence, is maybe sort of the apex of this, but every shot is sort of a masterpiece all on its own. Like
yes.
every frame is like a piece of art. And so he had already managed to like just innately do that naturally. That's one of the things that makes Spielberg Spielberg. But this movie, he like he stepped up his game quite a bit, and you can see how he learned to turn one shot into four shots.
Yeah.
So he could do these long single takes. That my favorite, I think, the blocking 101. This is blocking 101 for your listeners.
Mm,
Watch Jaws and take note of the scene when they get on the ferry and the city council, the mayor and the businessmen come up to talk to Brody, and the you can see the ferry, it turns, and it starts as like I think like a three shot,
yeah.
and then it turns into a two shot with just the mayor, and then turns into a single, like just by simple blocking and never cutting the camera, he's able to get, and by moving the background,
Yeah.
changing the background up, he turns one shot into something that's really three or four shots. And he does it again later in the film. He's just when they I think when they are talking in front of the sign after the sign's been defaced, I think
Oh
he does it
yeah.
again. And it's just, you see filmmakers doing stuff like that. Quentin Tarantino is doing stuff like that. Really, again, kind of a guy coming into his own with blocking in a movie like Inglorious Bastards, and sort of understanding that you can make a lot more with very little just by moving the chess pieces around the board.
Exactly. And don't you find as well that the thing that Spielberg does so well is that even though he's doing all these incredible shots, it never feels like you're being dictated to. It never takes you out of the film if you're going, that's a
Mm-mm.
cool shot. It's only if you sit and watch for it, it becomes apparent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, Many people's favorite shot of Jaws is the Zolly, what they call the Jaws shot,
Mm.
where Brody realizes what's actually happening, that there's actually a shark in the water eating a small child, um, and that sort of was I learned it as a Zolly, a
Yeah.
zooming dolly. So you dolly in and zoom out at the same time, and also hold focus on the subject. And a lot of people call it the Jaws shot. It's actually something Hitchcock
I was going to
came
say
up
it's a
with.
Hitchcock in it, Vertigo and stuff.
The
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vertigo, yep. And it's just a really nice way of, like, watching somebody fall down without watching somebody fall down, right? It's like you're seeing just
It's the
the
physical.
impact.
Yeah, it's the visual version of the physical manifestation of shock or realization. Everything
Yeah,
rushes in and out at the same time. It's yeah,
yeah.
and what a way to bring it to screen as well. No, it's wonderful. Is there one particular scene in it that you absolutely adore? That's it's tricky because it's a film that not only like we mentioned Tarantino, which has tons of iconic scenes at the same time, it just marries up perfectly and flawlessly. This being Jaws. So is there one particular part that stands out you more than any else, or as a whole?
Well, the 4th of July, like, beach sequence is obviously really high up there. The whole, um, like, all the Zolly stuff and the band and all the people and stuff, yeah, I really like that scene. The fake out with Bad Hat Harry, I really love. It's all in that scene. Um, for performance, the comparing of the scars and the USS Indianapolis, like, all of that stuff is just top notch performance wise. That's where I would kind of lean, but technical and visual, I really love that beach scene.
It is, yeah, me too. And the way he's so good at Spielberg is so good at like everything is happy and triumphant. For me, true horror, or when I say what really affects me is a sense of unease, a sense of
Mhm.
the uncanny. And I think Spielberg is a master of creating that without over egging the pudding or making you have to feel a certain way, that everything can be broad sunlight, brass band, happiness, people playing, but at the same time is that thin undercurrent of something is not right, something is about to go very, very wrong. And
Yep.
he, considering, like you say, one of his first major films, works it to perfection. Absolutely amazing piece of work,
Well,
amazing piece of art.
and he was almost not the director. They had a different director assigned to this originally.
Crazy.
A guy named Dick Richards. It's a
Right.
funny name. Yeah, and they had him in a meeting, and he was giving his like take on, oh yeah, and he said something like, yeah, when the whale comes out of the water, and they were like, oh, this guy has
No
this
idea.
confused. No, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And admittedly, the name of the boat is the Orca, but obviously they're not hunting a whale. It's not Moby Dick, which also was originally in the story. That was originally Robert Shaw's introduction, was he was going to be watching Moby Dick on a screen and laughing at it. Um, but yeah, so they were like, yeah, we got to get somebody else, and Spielberg kind of worked his way into it. Saw the script on the top of the desk and was like, can I do that? So I got it.
Doesn't that always strike you as well? I've always these sort of stories you hear, and it's sort of like so many of the classics, so many of people's big starts in movies. It's that lovely joy of a happy accident, of usually big accidents or mistakes happening that lead to this massive need to just creatively come up with a solution. Do you find that in your work as well, that sometimes it just feels like high level problem solving to create a need, and then in that some of the truest art and some of the purest moments happen with that loss of control and that need to just find an answer quickly.
So my take is that yes, if but it depends on the people making the decisions. So if
Mm,
you have a director who loses his mind when something goes wrong, he or she loses their mind when something goes wrong, then you're not going to get something good out of it.
yeah,
If you have somebody who huddles the group together and says, "What can we do?" and listens to ideas. That's where, people like really good first ADs are really good at problem solving and sort of saying, "Well, what if we do this?" And it's really easy to just kind of shut them down because they're logistics people. Uh, but but generally speaking, ADs sort of understand the sense of timing, and they're already thinking like, "Can we combine, we have a day that's full of, we have 20 shots we have to get today, which is crazy. So, can we combine some of three or four of these together and to make them one shot?
yeah,
Can we do that?" And so, being willing to listen to ideas, even if you don't take those ideas, you might change the idea a little bit, or it might give you inspiration for another idea, but being willing to listen to those ideas. So that's the key, is having people who aren't going to just like panic in the face of adversity. The shark in this movie, the mechanical shark, they took it out on day one and it sank. and the salt water, they only tested it in fresh water on the
Wow.
Universal lot, and the salt water just absolutely wreaked havoc on the gears, and so immediately they lost the shark, and so they got creative, and they didn't panic, and they were over budget and over schedule, and probably internally Steven Spielberg was panicking, but on set, he's doing his job, and you know even if you got actors that are fighting and hate each other, you just you can't panic. You have to get
I
creative.
find a way. And I think you said something that's actually really resonated with me because I get it from acting. My acting coach always said to me, and still does, he's not gone anywhere, but he says, be interested, not interesting. So that he means within a scene, stop trying to be performative and doing something that you think you'll know will be clever, and listen to the other performers in or performer in the scene, listen to the director, listen to what everyone's saying, be open and able and willing to change and be in the moment. And what you said there, it's funny, like I say, no matter which level, what part you're performing within an artistic work, how some of the rules in a way stay the same, having the ability to decide, but also to be open to opportunity and other points of view as well.
Yeah, and I think for actors too, you're talking about listening and listening to the director and all that. Um, if you have a good director, your director knows what they want,
Yes.
and that will, I mean, that obviously goes so far for actors because then they're not guessing at trying to like at what the scene is supposed to be. And that's actually a question when I go to screenings and they do Q&As. If the actors are there, it's the same. I ask them all the same question, which is, what's the best thing a director can do for you? And John C. Riley, who I love,
Mm.
said the thing that I think resonated the most with me, which is, as a director, know what you want. Know what you
Yes.
want and know when you've got it. Don't make us keep doing something. Don't do 10 safety takes.
Yeah.
Know what you want, know when you've got it. And for actors, so any directors listening, that's your advice. And then for the actors, like, when you'll know when you've got a good director, when they know those things. So
Do you know what is for me? Yeah, from an actor's perspective, when that director has a sense of confidence, when you know they've done the work and they know you've done the work, and it's just that instantly that trust and that bond of confidence, like, well, I'll follow you anywhere now because you know, like
yeah,
exactly what you just said there. It's you know what you need. It's my job to collaborate and then give you what you need. And if we've got that, then the work, so to speak, becomes an absolute joy and it becomes easy because we're playing then because we both know
yeah.
what we need.
Well,
So, well,
a great example of that is Christopher Nolan. and
ah,
you can see every actor wants to work with them, and every
yeah,
actor wants to work with him multiple times, like over and over again. And Christopher Nolan's one of those confident guys who knows what he wants. Oppenheimer was not storyboarded. That's a long, complicated movie to not visually
how
plan ahead of time.
and the cameras he's using as well to do that.
Yeah,
So that
yeah, expensive.
that's very impressive.
Yeah, so that's a really great example of a really confident director who knows what they want. So
And what an auteur as well. Absolutely amazing. Well,
yeah,
we've done the Jaws, we've done the Sunrise. So now onto a film that one of my overriding memories for me as a child was non-stop crying.
yeah.
So
Me as an adult.
yeah, it still gets you. I mean, Henry Thomas, what a performance. So
Yeah.
E.T., the extraterrestrial. And again, it's a bit of a not a redundant question like Jaws, but why E.T.? Why your favorite film of all time?
Yeah, so it's funny, when I was in film school, and I say film school, it was not exactly film school, but when I was in school to learn how to make movies, uh, I I was of the belief that you can't have a favorite film. It's like picking your favorite child. You hear that a lot. Not to make fun of people who say that, but um, uh, it at some point it just clicked, and I was like, why can't you have a favorite movie? There is
Yeah.
one movie that just affects me more than others, and it's ET, and I'm just gonna embrace that. And so now I tell people this is my favorite movie of all time, and it is, and it's because in a weird way, I guess I sort of identify with it.
Mm,
Um, Definitely on a different level than I think the intention. This is a really personal story for Spielberg. This is sort of about how he wished that he had a best friend when his parents were going through a split, um, and the fallout of that, and
Mm,
um, feeling like you have to grow up really fast.
mm,
Spielberg definitely had to do that, discovering his mother's infidelity by accident, um, and feeling like you have to protect your the adults in your life.
yeah,
Um, and I didn't have to grow up like that, but I was like, oh, maybe a weird kid. I think a lot of um, performer or storytellers are kind of weird when they're
yeah,
young, and that can be ostracizing and sort of lonely. And I think I identify with Elliot in that way. Even though my parents were happily married until the day my dad died.
mm,
Uh, and yeah, so I think that's probably why I connect to it the most, but also the sappy things, right? Like, I believe that as a filmmaker, my job is to like manipulate you and make you cry or make you laugh or make you afraid or whatever it is. Like, my job is to like make you do something that maybe you weren't prepared to do. And this movie is so good at that, and
yeah,
I love that. And again, Steven Spielberg, trying to do things that are innovative, shooting the movie almost entirely from the eye level of children, because
yes,
that's the perspective, right? Um, the idea that you don't get this in the movie, but we know this after the fact that ET is like, 10 million years old, and he's non-binary. He's not, I say he, but it's
it,
they,
yeah, yeah,
ET is a plant essentially, and they're there to like cultivate more plants, more things like them. And there's like some sort of like, you know, probably unintentional, subtle, like hippie Mother Earth stuff involved in that. There's something kind of Jules Verne about it as well, like, in the design of the spaceship. And
yeah.
it's yeah, it's kind of I don't know. There's just so much to it that I think is just really interesting and beautiful and emotional. Um
I
and
think another
yeah.
thing that Spielberg does that, so if you'd agree with this as well, he's so thematically rich. So I always say a big thing about art is that if you explain exactly what it is, then you can lose a lot of what people want to read into it themselves and make it
Mhm.
their own. And I think
Yeah.
Spielberg is very good and exactly what you've just explained there, that it can mean so many different things to so many different people. So you take ownership of it then, and it becomes so important to you. And you, like you say, becomes a favorite movie because it becomes so personal.
Well, and he trusted his actors,
Yeah.
which I think goes a long way. Um, you know, Working with those children is probably really, really difficult. I think there's like a story where like Drew Barrymore came to set one day and she kept blowing her lines, and he got mad at her and like yelled at her on set, and she started, just inconsolably crying. Uh and then he comes to find out that she's actually sick and has a fever. And so he sent her home once he found that out, and everything was understandable, and he wrote like a nice, I'm sorry to her. Um but I think so there's these difficulties, but I think he like sort of learned that there's a lot of trust, that if you just allow them to kind of do what they're going to do, you'll get something unique. So again, with Drew Barrymore, she believed that thing was real, and he just allowed, instead of like, hey, this is a job, this is acting, da da da
Mm,
da. Instead of having that conversation, he just sort of like trusted in sort of the joy of a child, and sort of like let them explore that. They also shot the movie chronologically for the kids. So when they had to say goodbye to ET at the end of the film, they were saying goodbye to ET at the end of the film,
oh,
and and that was it for them. They were never going to see ET again. So all of that emotion that you're seeing at the end is all, it's all real. Um, uh, I think on some level, they all know that they're actors. I went to a screening of ET with a Q&A, and Dee Wallace was there, and she told a story about Drew, and that before they went in for the whole government working on ET and trying to like shock him back to life and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, that they she looked at Drew and said, "Okay, this is going to be really scary. You just remember this is acting." And she went it and she looked at her and she said, uh, "I know that," really confidently. "I know that." And they started rolling camera and they went in the room, and the moment she saw ET laying on the table, she lost it. Just
Wow.
absolutely in control, uncontrollable sobbing. And it's just sort of like allowing kids to be kids and trusting that um goes such a long way. And Spielberg was really smart. He did the same thing for D. Wallace too. There's a scene early in the film when they're talking about the dad. They're having dinner, and um, and Elliot's mad at his mom. He's mad at everybody because nobody believes him.
Hmm.
And then she's like, "Well, why don't you ask your father?" And he's like, "I can't. He's with Sally in Mexico." And it hurts the mom, right? And she like
Yeah.
turns away and goes to the sink. And so they did the take, and she turns away, and Spielberg's like, "Okay, why did you turn away from the scene?" She said, "I can't let the kids see me cry." And he turned to his set design people and said, "You have an hour. I need you to build me a sink."
Wow.
So she has somewhere to go. And that became its own shot, was her at the sink trying not to cry in front of the kids. It's trusting your actors, you know.
Yes. And like for me, like what you're saying there is with a child, a lot of the time they don't play at being a pirate, they are a pirate. I
Mhm.
think as a creator of art, you try to lose yourself. You try to find what you had as a child to remove that gap. I am being right, and not I am being, just I am. And I think a lot of the time, as a viewer, you want that from an audience, someone who's appreciating your art. That we talk about it, we talk about certain shots, we talk about music and stuff, but truly, when you're in the moment with a movie, with a picture, listening to an album, playing a video game, whatever, you lose yourself in that moment and you become pure and like your childhood self again. Do you think that's what you sort of seek for in art, both making and watching?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a big piece of another piece of why I love ET is I can just be Elliot,
Yeah,
for 2 hours. There's something really pure about that, and I think a lot of people wistfully think back to their childhood and go, "Man, if I could be a kid again." And this movie allows you to do that. You get all the fantasy and sort of imagination that you have as a kid, and the adventure you wish you could go on, and the friend that you wish you had made. And um, the there is a closeness, a bond between those members of the family, which is really beautiful.
yeah,
Uh, Elliot's first kiss, the girl he has a crush on, like he sort
yeah.
of like he goes through the whole adventure, and you get to sort of live that again every time you watch that movie.
It's a perfect film. I have to thank you because in these three choices, you've literally like got me right in the feels three times and absolutely being spellbound and at the point of tears at a couple of times in Sunrise as well. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Oh,
these
you're
three
welcome.
choices, Wes. Well, listen, we've done it. We've got through all three. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for your insight and stuff. Well, I would just like to ask before we wrap up here. Is there
Mhm.
anywhere where obviously we've got the podcast, View the Right Thing on Spotify and stuff? Go and check it out. But is there anywhere else you'd like people to check out any of your work at all? Or let me know and I'll put
Um,
them in the show notes as well.
so we're on TikTok, View the Right Thing on TikTok, on Instagram, VTRT movies. Um,
VT.
and then the new thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get our Patreon going.
Nice.
So there's a free tier on Patreon. We're gonna post, updates on when new episodes are coming out. I'm gonna try and post a little bit ahead of time, so if people missed an episode, they know what the next movie is. I don't want to do it too early. We actually record, I think we have 5 in the can right now, so we have
Good
5 weeks
work.
already ready to go. Um, and I give you a sneak peek just for your podcast if you
Go on
want.
him.
So we just did Top Gun Maverick. We got Braveheart after
Oh,
that. We have the movie Sounder from the 70s. We've got
nice.
Cat Ballou, um, and Dances with Wolves is the most recent one we recorded. And then we have the next two about to be recorded. So
Amazing.
so yeah, go to our Patreon. I think it's VTRT Movies is there as well. But if you look up View the Right Thing on Patreon, you subscribe for free. It helps us out, makes us feel good and warm and fuzzy. If anybody is listening in the US, I apologize to people not in the US. We're going to try and do some giveaways. So we do have a giveaway for our paid people,
Nice.
which we don't really have any paid people yet, um, but there is a thing there, and it's a first come first serve digital code for Top Gun Maverick. So whoever
Brilliant.
whoever whoever can see so it's like you can't, the post is blurred out
Right.
unless you're a paying member. So somebody pays and they see the post, they can just enter the code. The reason I say it's only for US is just because those codes I pull out of the DVD cases are usually
US.
US only.
They've
So
worked it
apologies.
out. They went, no, no, it's fine. But I would say for everyone listening to this podcast, I know there's quite a few now. Please go over and check out View the Right Thing. It's such a wonderful look into cinema and wonderful movies from across the range of like the years, but at the same time, such an informal and friendly and just enjoyable. Someone who's passionate about something inspires passion, and your podcast is one of the most passionate I know. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Wes.
That's really
Well,
nice of you
let's
to say.
go on. Sorry.
I was just saying it was really nice of you to say. And you can find us pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google or whatever, you should be able to find us. So
I will make sure to put all the links in the show notes as well, mate. But all I can say is thank you so much for your time today. Time is
thank you.
precious, and you've spent a good long time with me. So it really means the world. And I'll speak to you again soon, mate.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.